Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I'll review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication, and what I'll be doing this week is continuing my examination of the televised works of Stephen King. Specifically, I will be looking at 2004's spinoff, sequel, prequel, to the previous year's smash hit Rose Red, with this being 2003's The Diary of Ellen Rimbauer. So I just wanted to say welcome, everyone, to the Stephen King Cast. Longtime listeners, welcome back as always. Thank you for the year's worth of support. And first-time listeners, welcome. Welcome to the Stephen King Cast. I want to fill you in a little bit on how to best experience the Stephen King Cast and all the different options that you have. So what you're listening to right now is the current focus of the podcast. Like I said, I am going through what I have not covered yet in terms of the televised works of Stephen King. And, you know, after having done this for over 12 years, I realized that there were some gaps. And so I wanted to go and fill those gaps in. So in some cases, that means looking retroactively back on some reviews that I have done and adding new content with some new thoughts. But in most cases, it's going and finding the televised works that I never got to and reviewing them for the first time around. And so you'll be getting them on a weekly basis. And if the review will be up towards the top of the feed for about a month, and then after feed I will place it chronologically where it is supposed to be in relation to the text. So, for instance, I will be reviewing. Like today is the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer, and that does not have a text that it had been based off of. However, the next episode that I do is going to be the Rob Lowe starring 2004 adaptation of Salem's Lot. So once I'm done with Salem's Lot, and after a month has passed after being released, I'm going to remove it from the top of the feed, and I'm going to place it following the review of the text Salem's Lot, which was Stephen King's second book after Carrie. So the way to listen to the Stephen King Cast is, as it states, it's in the chronological order of publication of the texts. So what you have to do is just make sure that you know where the books were published chronologically. And if there's a corresponding either television adaptation or a movie, those reviews will take place in between the book upon which they're based and then the next book in the order of publication. I hope that makes sense to everyone. So, for instance, if you want the review of the ABC TV miniseries, well, you're not going to look for it in 1990, around 1990 with the books that were published in 1990. No, you're going to go to it because it's based on it. So it was published in 1986. So, you know, head further down, find it. There's a 3-part it review. There's a review of the conclusion of it. There's a connection to it and the Dark Tower. And then you will see all of the audiovisual interpretations of this character. There's the ABC TV miniseries. There's the review of It Chapter 1, It Chapter 2, and then It Welcome to Derry. So that's the way that this podcast, the main feed, is structured, and I hope that you enjoy it. Also, there are more options for you out there than just the main podcast feed. There is also the Patreon episodes that you can get. So over on Patreon, there's 2 tiers currently as I record this. There may be a third in the future. So by the time you're listening to this, there actually might be 3 tiers. But at the moment, there are 2 tiers. And for $5, the Constant Reader tier will give you early access to the Stephen King Cast. So this is really good for longtime listeners who don't have 200 plus older episodes to make your way through. This is for everyone that has listened to every single episode, and is like me when you have that favorite podcast and the new episode comes, it drops, and you're like, oh, I gotta wait another week. Well, good thing for you is that with the constant reader tier, you have early access to future Stephen King cast episodes. And I'm looking to find additional content to put on over there as well. For instance, if there's any Stephen King news, I might thread that through the constant reader tier. So that's a great place to continue your Stephen King cast journey. And then for $10 a month, you get a brand new podcast feed that is updated regularly, that has everything to do beyond Stephen King. So it's currently called The Deadlights. I may change it because The Deadlights is a Stephen King reference, and really this particular tier, The Deadlights, has really not that much to do with Stephen King. So this is where I get to talk about every other pop cultural thing that I haven't had a chance to talk about, due to having been so focused on Stephen King for the last 12 years with this particular podcast. So taking everything that you like about the Stephen King cast and then just applying it to other projects. So at the time of this recording, I have reviewed A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I have reviewed Primate, the horror movie that came out in January of 2025. I have done an exploration, a deep dive into Batman as a pop cultural intellectual property. I've explored just the evolution of Batman throughout the years, those high points, those moments of punctuated equilibrium that really just pushed Batman to that next level in pop culture. And I ground all of this through an examination and conversation of the more recent interpretation of Batman in the Absolute line of comic books, the Absolute Batman. And I discuss the implications of what this means for Batman as a whole, pop culturally speaking, as public domain looms for the Caped Crusader. So that was a great episode to do, and I will be doing future installments looking at Batman. I also touch upon influential and seminal moments of Batman and the Batman comic book arcs and stories that I recommend outside of your classic Batman Year Ones and the Killing Jokes and the Dark Knight Returns. I try to shine a light on ones that are not talked about pop culturally the way that those ones are. So Batman was a great conversation to have. Like I said, I did a review of Primate. And at the time of this recording, which will drop, in a few months, actually. So by that point, you should have a review of Predator Badlands, which you can access on Hulu, as well as a state of the Predator franchise. A review focusing purely on the pop cultural history of Godzilla, leading into a weekly review of Monarch: Legacy of Monsters Season 2 on Apple TV, a review of Wonder Man, the Disney Plus television show, which I use as a springboard to discuss the state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we head into, or crawl towards Doomsday. And then there is the starting in April, the weekly, or every other week review of the final season of Eric Kripke's The Boys. And that is just to start. Every time I review a horror movie, you'll be able to get my thoughts on that horror movie as well over on the Deadlights version. So I'm really excited to get this feed up and running, and you can access it by heading on over to Patreon and signing up for it there. I'm really, really excited, everyone. And also, I'd like to point you to stephenkingcast.com, which is the hub of all things Stephen King Cast. There, you'll be able to get all of the free feed episodes. You're going to be able to get curated collections for your listening enjoyment. So basically, rather than hunting and pecking through the chronology of the timeline, I'm in the midst of organizing everything so it's nice and easy for you. So for instance, if you want to do a deep dive into Midworld and all of the Dark Tower books, rather than finding all of them throughout the chronology on the podcast feed, you can just go to stephenkingcast.com, go to collections, and click on the Dark Tower collection, and everything related to the Dark Tower is there for you right there. The two-part Gunslinger review, the Drawing of the Three review with the bonus episode, contextualizing it within the larger mythos of the Dark Tower, reviews of the Talisman and Black House and the Wastelands, and the bonus episode of the Wastelands, contextualizing that within the larger Dark Tower mythos. Wizard in Glass, the bonus episode to Wizard in Glass, Insomnia, Everything's Eventual, Little Sisters of Illyria, Hearts in Atlantis, Low Men in Yellow Coats specifically, Wolves of the Kala, Song of Susanna, the Dark Tower itself. All of it is there for you, laid out, organized nicely. The Stand is there. The bonus episode of The Stand, connecting it to the Dark Tower. Eyes of the Dragon is there. It is there as well. I believe I put it in there. Salem's Lot is there. So it's all nicely organized for you over in the collections section of stephenkingcast.com. There's also a blog where if I might be strapped for time and don't have time to sit down and do a recording, I'll be able to head on over and do a blog entry, keeping everyone up to date. So for instance, I just wrote a blog on the news that Mike Flanagan is adapting The Mist for some reason. So to get all my thoughts on why I think that is a bad idea, head on over to stephenkingcast.com. And also on stephenkingcast.com, you'll be able to find something called the playlists. And what I have done is created music playlists based on the each title by Stephen King. These are songs that are either referenced in the book or occur in the movie or are either comedically or thematically linked. And so there's a playlist for you there. Also within the playlist, you'll be able to find the Stephen King Cast episodes related to that particular story. So you can find that there, and there's also a link to the Patreon, and there's just a very easy way of contacting me over there. It says contact, and there's just a message form that you can fill out that gets sent directly to stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. So I'm trying to make Stephen King Cast just one-stop shop for you to get everything that you need for this particular podcast. You can also follow me on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and on Blue Sky. So I'll keep everyone up to date with things on Facebook. Instagram's always a fun place to post. And then over on TikTok, you follow me for quick little bite-sized appetizers of Stephen King lore and mythology. So for instance, I just finished just a minute-long quick deep dive into the different types of vampires found within the Stephen King multiverse. And then similarly, I did an examination of all of the bug insect creatures that we see from one Stephen King property to the next. So doing the TikTok videos has been a real refreshing change of pace for me. And I hope that you enjoy them. So make sure that you're following me over on TikTok as well. And as always, if you have any time on your hands, leaving a review on the podcast platform that you use to listen to the Stephen King Cast, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon or YouTube, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I just mentioned stephenkingcast at yahoo.com and writing in if you have any time on your hands. I love it. I love it when I get listener emails, and I want to spend some time sharing some listener emails with everyone before I get into the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer. So up first, Matt writes, "Hello, good sir. I wanted to reach out to thank you for your podcast. I've been listening for the last 5 years and have really enjoyed your reviews and thoughts on the works of the king. I work the afternoon shift and listen to you on my way home at night. I feel like my drive is done almost immediately when I start listening." So I'm going to interject here. So that means the world to me, because I know that feeling of listening to a podcast that I love, and making that commute, whatever the commute may be, that much more enjoyable. And having that voice and that sort of like friendship, that relationship that you have throughout the years with a favorite podcast, that's really, really important. I love being able in the morning to just hop in the car, throw on my podcast, and drive to go get my coffee. I love it. And I love in the morning waking up, again, getting my coffee, driving to work, and knowing that there's a fresh podcast for me to listen to. So to know that I am that for someone else, means the world to me. Matt continues, "Your insight aligns with how I feel about a lot of his works. I enjoy the synopsis of the story, then how you feel about it, as well as the ending, if it lands or not." So what Matt is referring to, I have reorganized the podcast feed so it really, like I said, is in the chronological order of publication. So what originally had happened was I reviewed everything that Stephen King had done from start to finish. I caught up with him in his current publication range. And then now that I had caught up, I did some different things. I reviewed some movies that I hadn't reviewed before. I reviewed some television shows as they came out. I did some non-Stephen King book reviews. I did some non-Stephen King TV reviews. I did some top 10 lists. And then I just needed a focus. And around the time that The Outsider came out on HBO, everyone was talking about Stephen King not having an ability to end his stories. And I decided to really put that to the test. And so I went back to the beginning again, and then specifically examined the end of the works of Stephen King, book by book by book by book, to determine whether or not he had he deserves this reputation for not being able to finish his endings. And so when I reordered everything, I just made sure that everything related to that core text followed the text. So for instance, if you start with Carrie, you're going to get the review of Carrie, then you're going to get an examination on the end of Carrie, then you're going to get the adaptation, the reviews of the adaptations, then it's going to go to Salem's Lot. You're going to listen to the review of Salem's Lot, then the review about the ending of Salem's Lot, then you're going to get the adaptations from Salem's Lot, then you're going to get The Shining, then you're going to get a review of the ending of The Shining, then you're going to get a review of the adaptations of The Shining, then you're going to get to The Dead Zone, then you're going to get to the ending of The Dead Zone. So I think that you get the point, but that's how it's now structured. Just yesterday, I listened to your announcement about the future of the podcast and website, and I'm very excited to see you branching out into more works and information. Thank you very much, and you can find all that information over on stephenkingcast.com and head on over to Patreon. 2 quick things, then I'll let you go. First, thank you, and thank you for recommending King's Sorrow by Joe Hill. Fabulous story. I was pulled in immediately and cared so much for each character. I could imagine them in my mind from the get-go. So I'm going to interject again. If you have not listened to my review of King's Sorrow, you can find it on the podcast feed. I didn't plan on reviewing it, and it was actually kind of, I'm glad that I didn't plan on reviewing it, because when I plan on reviewing a novel, I have my phone with me, I'm taking notes as I go, and I just loved getting lost in this story without thinking about it critically. It's a beautiful, beautiful novel, and it just became an instant all-time favorite novel of all time for me, and I strongly recommend King's Sorrow by Joe Hill. Two, maybe you've discussed this before on previous podcasts that I've missed, but have you ever reviewed King's short stories, like each one separately? I love to collect the stories when they release in the New Yorker and other publications. My thoughts were to review 1 to 5 an episode, then share your feelings. I'm sure you thought this through, though, already. LOL. Anyway, thank you again and keep up the insightful work. So, if you want my short story reviews, they exist. There's a couple ways to get them. One, you can just go through the main feed and find them by the published short stories, Night Shift, and then with the way that they're organized here, it's Night Shift and then all of the adaptations springing out of Night Shift. And then you'll get, then you go through the publication, chronological order publication, until you get to the next short story collection, Skeleton Crew. And then similarly, after my review of Skeleton Crew, you get all of the adaptations that come out of Skeleton Crew, yada, yada, yada. Get to the next one, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, so on and so forth. Or you can head on over to stephenkingcast.com, go to collections, and click on short stories, and everything you need is right there, ready for you to listen to. So those are just a couple ways of being able to listen to my reviews of the short stories by Stephen King. So thank you, Matt, for writing in. Chris writes, I stumbled across your podcast looking for in-depth reviews of King books years ago. Couldn't tell you what my first episode was, but I've listened to your reviews after every book I've read. I've had trouble getting into the Talisman and the Dark Tower books. A friend said that the new Talisman book is supposed to be open to new readers and I could read Black House on its own. Do you think that I could jump into Black House and the new Talisman novel without trying the first one for a third time? Regardless of the answer, thanks for the great podcasts over the years. So, Chris, thank you so much for listening. And to answer your question, so actually, before I answer your question, if anyone wants my thoughts on the new novel that he's referring to, which is called Other Worlds Than These, it is the third and final novel in what we can now call the Talisman trilogy by Stephen King and posthumously Peter Straub in this case. Rest in peace, Peter Straub. That is a loss. So at the time of this recording, which is February of 2026, the novel is slated to release in October. And for if you want my thoughts and my musings on the possibilities, my hopes, my expectations of Other Worlds Than These, then you can head to the Deadlights tier of the Patreon page. There's an entire episode dedicated to just this, talking about Other Worlds Than These. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I strongly recommend it. In terms of skipping the Talisman, so I would say if you can't get into it, sure, just skip it. I mean, I recommend everyone reading the books in the order that they're meant to be read in. But if you can't get into the Talisman, the Black House is so different that it basically is its own novel. The Jack Sawyer that you meet is decades older than the Jack Sawyer that you meet in the Talisman. He's essentially a new character. There are references and emotional beats that pay off if you have read the Talisman, but King and Straub, do a great job at, you'll understand. I mean, you'll know what the reference is. I mean, it's not like a reference that's going to go over your head. It'll just land for you with a little bit more impact if you had experienced it on the journey of the Talisman. But it's not like you won't understand cerebrally what's going on. But it's very much its own story. It does not share many of the same characters from the Talisman. Now that you say it, you can really, read it like a standalone novel. And the third novel is referred to as a standalone entry. But strangely enough, it's also being referred to as the concluding text on both the Territories and Midworld from the Dark Tower series. So it's strange to have something that's being described as this wrap-up book for thousands of pages and decades of time, but also being a standalone story. But to answer your question regarding Black House, yeah, you could just skip the Talisman and go right to that one. All right, guys. So if you have any thoughts on any of that, head on over to stephenkingcast@yahoo.com and shoot me an email, or you can go to stephenkingcast.com and click on Contact Us or Contact Me, and then just shoot me a message through that form that's there. Thank you, everyone. So let's talk about the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer. So like the preceding Rose Red, the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer was a blind spot for me. I have less knowledge of this than I even did of Rose Red. Now, this is an adaptation of a spin-off book written, not by King, as a supplemental promotional piece for Rose Red. And based on the ratings success of Rose Red a year prior, it made sense to continue to explore this world. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read the Wikipedia summary so that I have a basis upon which we can build our analysis, and then we'll just get right off to the races and start talking about the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer. So the film is an adaptation of the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer, My Life at Rose Red, written by Ridley Pearson under the pseudonym Joyce Reardon, Ph.D. This was played by Nancy Travis in Rose Red. Pearson's novel was based on the script of Stephen King's Rose Red. The plot revolves around the construction of the Rimbauer Mansion, Rose Red, in Seattle, Washington, tracing a series of mysterious accidents throughout the mansion's early history which cause it to become cursed. Set at the turn of the 20th century, the stately, sinister mansion is constructed by powerful Seattle oil magnate John Rimbauer as a wedding present for his timid, submissive young bride, Ellen. Rimbauer uses much of his wealth to build the mansion in the Tudor neo-Gothic style and situate it on 40 acres of woodland. The site has been a Native American burial ground. The house, isn't it always the way? The house appeared cursed even as it was being constructed. 3 construction workers are killed on site, and a construction foreman was murdered by a co-worker. Shortly after her marriage to Rimbauer, Ellen begins keeping a diary in which she confesses her anxieties about her new marriage, expresses her confusion over her emergent sexuality, and contemplates the nightmare that her life is becoming. Ellen soon has 2 children, which helps soothe her painful relationship with her husband. First a boy named Adam, and then a girl, born with a deformed, withered arm named April. At first impressed by her husband's extravagance, Ellen eventually hates and fears John, especially when learning unsavory acts about his past. Meanwhile, the number of individual hauntings in the mansions increase, possibly including the ghosts of the many people close to John who have mysteriously vanished. Ellen interprets the eerie manifestations as a warning that she, too, may someday disappear without a trace. Years after her young daughter April also vanishes inside the estate, Ellen and her maid and confidant Sukina still continue to live in the house. After John's death, Ellen believes that if she continues to build the house, she will never die. She uses nearly all of her inherited fortune to continually add to the home over the next several decades, enlarging it significantly. Rose Red begins growing by itself, adding new hallways, new corridors, new rooms, and new staircases seemingly overnight. But mysterious disappearances continue. Deanna Petrie, the famous actress friend of Ellen's, and Sukina both disappear Deanna Petrie, a famous actress of Ellen's, and Sukina both disappear over the next few years. Ellen herself disappears in 1950, never to be seen again. Oh. It's kind of interesting that it just kind of ends there. Anyway, so my review. Welcome to the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer, brought to you by the Sepia Filter, just in case you didn't know that this took place in the past. This movie begins at a seance seen in the flashback in Rose Red. The medium tells us that more people have gone missing, and Ellen attempts to purge the house from sin while pledging her love to it. That night, John comes to her room and demands to come in. She denies him entry, but there's a threat that he will return. Successfully pushing his advances and desires away, she turns to her diary and begins to channel her thoughts. In a flashback, we learn a little bit more about the early days of John and Ellen. We get the first meeting of Ellen and Rose Red, and start to meet the supporting characters who will round out the movie. Flashbacks from Rose Red are interspersed at this point, showing that the contractor killing takes place at the same moment that Ellen arrives on the ground. That contractor killing, we saw very clearly in Rose Red. It's at this same moment, with the shotgun blast just barely an echo, when John gets down on one knee and proposes, an ominous sign. Shortly after, John's indiscretions are hinted at while Ellen sits with the girls. The warnings go unheeded, and shortly after, Ellen and John travel to Africa, where Ellen first experiences John's adultery. Drugged by her husband, Ellen falls into an illness, and it's here she forms her bond with Sukina, as seen in the first movie. The same actress returns for her role, unlike John and Ellen, who are recast. The couple return to Rose Red, now completed, bringing Sukina with them, and they celebrate by hosting a ball. During the ball, Ellen expresses doubts and sadness at the realities of living with John. Ellen's friend explores the house, while the presence of the house begins to manifest itself. Ellen hears her name called. One of the guests explains the rumors of the curse upon the house and of the grounds. The party is interrupted with the scream from Ellen's friend, who is huddled in the corner of the room, clearly terrified from what she saw. Through her friend, the house speaks to Ellen and says, "I don't want to feel alone." That night, in the bedroom, John ties her to the bedpost despite her protestations and apologizes for his previous actions. It's a funny time to do it, when she's tied to a bed and telling him no. I don't think he means it. Months later, Ellen is pregnant, and she summons her friend Franny, the one who had bitterly warned Ellen of John's indiscretions prior to the wedding. There's a tense conversation between them, which is clear that Franny had been sleeping with John. The house pledges its allegiance to Rose by making Franny disappear out of thin air. Ellen meets with the medium, who will later arrive to the house soon after Ellen goes into labor and gives birth to a boy. After someone else goes missing, Sukina and Ellen make their way through the house exploring, and they find rooms that weren't in the plans. While exploring, they encounter their first ghost, the shackled vision of one of John's girls. Ellen, now knowing that John is more insidious than she had initially thought, demands that the seance occur within Rose Red, and we come back to the beginning of the movie where we're able to place the events in context. We now know that John has been feeding Rose Red through his actions to the girls, and now it makes sense when we hear Ellen say, "No more sin in this house." She's referring to John, and we understand why she pledges herself to the house. John discovers that his worker, Doug, has been having extramarital affairs with men, shames him, and fires him. With no other options, Doug hangs himself. Young April witnesses the hanging, and Ellen summons the medium to assist when April becomes nonverbal. Sukina and the medium discuss the dangers of the house, understanding that it's pulling energy from Ellen, reading her thoughts. Shortly after, the house takes April. Sukina is blamed and then arrested. She is released shortly after. Construction continues. Ellen continues to listen to the house and builds what is requested. Once the tower's construction is completed, Sukina and Ellen devise and concoct a plan to seduce John and push him through the window at the top, as seen in Rose Red, and the movie ends shortly thereafter. Here are my thoughts. There's really not much to say. It's a movie. It happened. It's not particularly good. It's not particularly bad. It exists like the ghosts within Rose Red itself. Kind of there, but not really. It is, I guess, a little bit interesting in the sense that it makes Ellen much more sympathetic than she had been presented in Rose Red. And we learned so much more about John being just a true monster, which wasn't clear in Rose Red. So the recontextualization of these two characters is, the focus and the thesis and the reason why this exists. But I don't know if it's interesting enough or good enough to actually justify its existence as a movie. It's just very much there. If you have not seen the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer, do not don't. You're not missing anything. It's not great. But I hope that you enjoyed my review of it. Thanks, everybody. So with this, we conclude 2003. After this, we are going to be heading into 2004. There are 3 televised works by Stephen King in 2004. That was also the year of the release of Wolves of the Kala. In 2004, I remember it like yesterday. So 2004, we're heading back to 2004, and we're going to begin with the Rob Lowe starring adaptation of Salem's Lot, which I have not seen since I watched it on TNT, I believe that it was. And from what I remember, it just very much looks like 2004. It'll be interesting to go back. I remember being bored out of my mind while watching it, and I just wonder if that's going to change. And then after my review of Salem's Lot, then we're going to get into my review of Stephen King's short-lived TV series Kingdom Hospital, which is a remake of the Danish Lars von Trier horror series, The Kingdom. And then we're going to conclude 2004 with the David Arquette starring Riding the Bullet. And then from there, we'll get into Nightmares and Dreamscapes, Desperation, Bag of Bones, Big Driver, seasons 2 and 3 of Mr. Mercedes, because I had already covered season 1. And I'll make sure that, they'll all be organized together. And then I will review Lisey's Story, and then Chapelwaite and The Institute. And hopefully by that point, by the time I am done, I can start talking about Mike Flanagan's television show adaptation of Carrie. And then at some point, The Institute Season 2 will be out, and you'll be getting my weekly reviews of that. And then hopefully sooner rather than later, Welcome to Derry Season 2 will return, and you can get all my thoughts on Welcome to Derry. And like I said, if you want access to these episodes early, head on over to the Patreon page and subscribe to the Constant Reader feed. And for everything not related to Stephen King, that's in the pop culture zeitgeist, head on over to Patreon and subscribe to what is currently called the Deadlights, but I'm probably going to change that name. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode, everyone. There are multiple ways to enjoy the Stephen King cast, so peruse at your leisure, and may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I'll see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen King cast.